In the autumn of 1780, a British officer sent a message across the Appalachian Mountains. It was addressed to the settlers of the far frontier, the hunters and farmers living beyond the reach of any king. And it was not a request. "Lay down your arms," it said. "Swear loyalty to the crown, or I will march my army over the mountains, hang your leaders, and lay your country waste with fire and sword." The man who sent it was Major Patrick Ferguson, and he was not a man who made empty threats. He was the finest marksman in the British Army, the inventor of the deadliest rifle of the age. A soldier so gifted that at 36 he commanded the entire loyalist militia of the South. The frontiersmen read his message in their cabin doorways, in the smoke of their autumn fires. They did not write back. Instead, they took down their long rifles from above the hearths. They kissed their families. And from every valley on the far side of the mountains, they began to walk east, toward the man who had promised to burn their world. 900 of them. No uniforms, no bayonets, no orders from any general. Washington did not even know they existed. Ferguson never received an answer to his message. He became the answer. In 65 minutes, on a lonely ridge called King's Mountain, his entire army would cease to exist, and the tide of the American Revolution would turn. This is the story of the deadliest reply in American history. To understand why 900 farmers crossed a mountain range to find one man, you have to understand the disaster of 1780. That spring, Charleston fell, and with it, 5,000 American soldiers, the worst surrender of the entire war. In August, at Camden, a second American army was shattered in under an hour. The survivors scattered into the swamps. 2 armies gone. In 90 days, Lord Cornwallis now ruled the South almost unopposed, and his plan was simple: march north, colony by colony, and strangle the revolution from below. But his left flank, the wild country toward the mountains, needed protecting. For that, he chose his most brilliant subordinate. Patrick Ferguson was no ordinary officer, a Scotsman. In the army since the age of 14, he had invented something the world had never seen: a rifle that loaded at the breech. A weapon that could fire 6 shots a minute, lying down, in the rain. He had demonstrated it before King George himself. At the Battle of Brandywine, it was said he once held an American officer in his sights, a tall man on a grey horse, and chose not to fire at a man's back. Some believe that man was George Washington. Now Ferguson commanded 1,000 loyalists, Americans who fought for the crown. He drilled them hard. He was proud of them. And he was certain that the ragged frontier could never stand against them. That certainty would carry him to a hilltop he would never leave. The men Ferguson threatened were unlike any soldiers in the world. They lived beyond the mountains, in the valleys of the Watauga and the Holston, so far from British power that the King's law had never truly reached them. Scots, Irish settlers, hunters, Indian fighters, men who fed their families with a rifle, one shot at a time. They could bark a squirrel out of a tree at 200 yards. They had no bayonets, no cannon, no drill. What they had was the long rifle, accurate at 3 times the range of a British musket, and a very personal reason to fight. Ferguson had not threatened their army. He had threatened their homes. On the 25th of September, 1780, they gathered at a river meadow called Sycamore Shoals. Over 1,000 men. A preacher gave them a sermon from the book of Judges, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Then they turned their horses toward the snow-covered passes. They crossed the mountains in 5 days. Ferguson learned they were coming, and for the first time the hunter felt hunted. He began to fall back toward Cornwallis, sending riders ahead, begging for reinforcements. The frontiersmen picked their 900 best men and best horses and rode through a day and a night of cold rain, eating in the saddle, determined to catch him before he reached safety. On the 6th of October, Ferguson stopped running. He chose a narrow, wooded ridge, rising 60 feet above the forest, as King's Mountain, and camped his 1,100 men along its flat crest. It looked unclimbable, unbeatable. He declared that he was on King's Mountain, that he was king of that mountain, and that God Almighty and all the rebels out of hell could not drive him from it. He did not fortify the slopes. He did not clear the trees. Why would he? No militia on earth would dare attack a hilltop held by trained troops. Through the rain, 900 riders were closing the last miles. If 900 farmers answering an empire's threat is the kind of history you want told properly, subscribe to Storied Past and stay with me. Because what happened on that ridge on the 7th of October, 1780, took 65 minutes and changed the war. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the frontiersmen dismounted in the dripping woods, tied their horses, and simply surrounded the mountain. No speeches. Their orders were 4 words long: shout like hell and fight like devils. Then the ridge exploded. From behind every tree and boulder, the long rifles began to speak, each man aiming, firing, sliding to new cover. Ferguson's loyalists answered with disciplined volleys and bayonet charges down the slopes. 3 times they drove the attackers back, and 3 times the frontiersmen melted into the trees, reloaded, and came back up. The loyalists on the bare crest were silhouetted against the sky, targets on a stage. The riflemen below were shadows among the trunks. It was not a battle Ferguson's men could win by courage, and they were the only ones in range. Ferguson rode the crest on horseback, a checked shirt over his uniform, rallying his line with a silver whistle, 2 swords broken in his hand. His men begged him to surrender. Surrender to what he called rabble? Never. He gathered a handful of riders and charged down the hill, sword raised, trying to cut a path through. The rifles found him. He fell from the saddle, and by the time his men reached him, the battle and his war was over. 65 minutes after the first shot, every man of his 1,100 was dead, wounded, or captured. Not one escaped. Here is the strangest truth about King's Mountain. It was a battle between Americans. loyalist neighbors against patriot neighbors, brother against brother on a Carolina ridge. The only British soldier on that mountain, the only congentese the cornice, was Ferguson himself. When the news reached Cornwallis, his invasion of the North stopped dead. He abandoned Charlotte and retreated. The frontier he had planned to terrify had instead reached out and erased a quarter of his army. And 3 months later, in the same backcountry, another band of farmers and militia would spring another impossible trap at a cattle pasture called the Cowpens. Thomas Jefferson would look back on that October ridge and call it the turn of the tide of success, the moment the war in the South began to run backward toward a place called Yorktown. The Overmountain Men did not stay to celebrate. They had harvests to bring in and homes to defend. Within weeks, they had melted back across the passes into the valleys beyond the King's maps. They had never asked Washington's permission. Most never appeared on an army roll. They came, they answered, and they vanished. Citizen soldiers in the purest sense the world has ever seen. Patrick Ferguson still lies where he fell, under a cairn of stones, on the ridge he swore God could not take from him. He promised the frontier fire and sword. The frontier sent back 65 minutes, and the Empire never threatened those mountains again.